Happy Monday afternoon. It's time to talk about the box office with Mr. Dan Murrell. We're charting.
We're charting.
I love charting.
Oh, so much fun.
And this has been a pretty interesting week in terms of movies moving around on those charts.
Debuting, moving around, lots of milestones, a little bit of history made. You know, one of those weekends you glance at it and you're like, it's just another weekend. But there's always some fun something or other going on. That's why we do the show.
You find the hidden gems.
Find the hidden gems.
Well, Maze Runner: The Death Cure opened this weekend. We have a review up if you guys are interested in our thoughts. But what did the box office think?
Well, kind of a mixed blessing. It was number one, so it's never a bad thing to debut at number one. It took $24 million. However, this is the lowest debut for a Maze Runner movie. It's the only one that's opened to less than $30 million. It's below openings for YA adaptations like Allegiant and Ender's Game, which were considered disappointments. This was a movie that was delayed for over a year because Dylan O'Brien was injured on set. They gave him time to recuperate. It was already trailing at the end of this kind of, not YA. When I say a lot of people last week, we talked about the end of YA. Of course, there are always going to be adaptations of books intended for young audiences. Sure. When I say YA, it's kind of the dystopian Hunger Games-ish section of YA. That trend has kind of tailed off, and it didn't help that this movie was already at the tail end of that, having been delayed. So respectable, I would say, would be what I would give the numbers. $24 million. It's not a complete bomb, but about the kind of numbers you would. It's decreasing as it goes, and
sure.
You're not going to see a movie like this. This is probably the last one of that particular type in this genre. So
did better than Divergent, which is not saying
not box office wise.
The last one, yeah.
Oh, the last one never came out.
Well, the last one before the last one, not the one that's going to TV. The last one that came out and then bombed.
Allegiant opened above even this. So
did it really?
It did. Yeah. Critically, it was. This movie was a little bit well regarded, but even still, this opened below Allegiant. So it's just opened in January. So it's kind of on a curve. Yeah, not great news for the Maze Runner, but hey, it's number one, Roth.
Hey, it's number one in the box office, and you know what? Sony's still having a good year.
Sony's still having a great year, and you know why Sony's having a great year?
Does it begin with The Rock?
It begins and ends with. Well, it doesn't, because Jack Black and everyone else is great in this movie too. Karen Gillan. Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle drops to number 2 after 3 weeks at the top of the chart. Still, though, only dropped about 17%. That's crazy, and it hit a few box office milestones, which we have graphics for. First of all, top Sony grossers. I've been talking about how this is going to be one of the highest grossing movies for Sony of all time. It's getting close to that on the global side. On the domestic side, it broke in. It is now the number 3 highest domestic grosser for Sony Pictures, below Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. It passes Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man 3 this weekend. If you adjust those numbers for inflation, it's actually still almost in the top 5 behind Skyfall and the first 3 Spider-Man movies. It's also, I believe, the 6th Sony Pictures release ever to break $800 million globally, which we'll talk about in a second. But it also did some damage at the 2017 charts, so going back to the last year, even though it's made the vast majority, or about half of its money, a little more than half this year, we still count it toward the 2017 totals. It's still doing some damage on those charts. Let's look at the domestic charts. It makes the top 5. It jumps over It jumps over Spider-Man. It's now one of the top 5 highest grossing movies domestically of 2017. And worldwide, when we first started tracking this, it's like, well, it might have an outside shot at doing this, but the way that it's wrecked these markets and the way that it's held in the U.S., worldwide, it has now jumped Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, and Wonder Woman is now the 9th highest grossing movie of the year worldwide of 2017. Knocks Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales off the list entirely. And then Wonder Woman. As much as we talk about Wonder Woman and the phenomenal box office, it has now outgrossed Wonder Woman. It's less than $60 million away from breaking into the top 5 worldwide of 2017, just altogether. And it hasn't opened in Japan yet. It doesn't open in Japan until April. Star Wars made $60 million there just this past month or so, and that's as much money as it needs to break into that top 5. So with all the rest of the world combined, the way it's holding here, and the fact that it's still going to Japan, I think Jumanji, just the testament of staying power, has a great shot at being one of the 5 highest grossing worldwide releases of 2017, both domestically and worldwide. again, we've talked about it. That's just a phenomenal success.
It is a phenomenal success that we can prepare ourselves for more of. I guarantee it. We will be seeing more of The Rock and Jumanji in the coming years.
Not only that, but there are already reports that Sony is eyeing a holiday release date to put it up against, guess what movie? Star Wars Episode 9.
Ooh.
Because guess what? They've just proven that they can take on the big boys, and there have been reports that Sony is potentially eyeing a holiday release for a sequel to this movie to put it again in direct competition with Star Wars. Now that is going to be...
That's a showdown.
That's a showdown if it comes to fruition. Now, who knows? There's 8 million different steps, but there were some reports that...
Place your bets.
Place your bets. And again, we talked about this. It's also showing that maybe studios with these big releases, we saw Deadpool move up to right before Solo.
Yeah.
Maybe studios are starting to say, I'm not quite as scared of Star Wars as maybe before Last Jedi came out, I thought that I should be.
Yeah, and maybe that scares Lucasfilm just a little bit. Not a lot, maybe just a little bit. There's a movie called Hostiles.
A movie called Hostiles, which is also in its 6th week of release, but it jumped up from, it had been limited release for over a month. It jumped up to over 2,500 screens and jumped into the top 5 in week 6. It stars Christian Bale and Wes Studi as an army officer and a Cheyenne chief. It's directed by Scott Cooper, who did Black Mass and Crazy Heart, which Jeff Goldblum won an Oscar for. $10 million jumping into the top 10. This is what you're seeing. Shape of Water jumped onto a lot more screens. It saw a big uptick in business. 3 Billboards jumped onto a few more screens. You're seeing some of the Oscar movies. Other ones like Call Me By Your Name actually the Oscar nominations didn't affect them much. So sometimes those Oscar nominations, Phantom Thread is another one, didn't see a big uptick in business after the Oscar nominations.
I wonder if it'll be post-awards what we'll start to see. Hostiles is an interesting one. It starts to speak to kind of the thirst for a different kind of movie and the power of Christian Bale. Because this movie, I mean, we watched it, is a straight up bummer. This is a really classic Western in a lot of ways. So to some degree, and then in other ways, it actually really subverts the Western.
I have an admission to make. I haven't watched it.
You didn't watch it yet?
Well, I had to watch some other movies from Honest Trailers that I won't spoil, but I'll tell you afterwards.
Okay.
And when I tell you what I watched instead of that movie, you're gonna find it hilarious.
Okay. Well, this is an interesting movie because it does both those things at once. It sort of plays into and very much against classic Westerns. It is dark. These are amazing performances, but I'm surprised to see it jump right there.
Yep.
Not a lot of competition, but you know what's holding on for...
Surprise.
The Greatest Showman.
Not only is The Greatest Showman holding on, it moves up one spot. It was number 5 last week. It moved up to number 4 because why not? It only dropped 10% again. This is insane what this movie is doing. You don't see it very often. It has now grossed over $125 million off an opening 4-day weekend of just over $14 million, a 3-day opening weekend of just over $8 million. It is going to pass the domestic gross of Transformers: The Last Night this week. It is going to the Hugh Jackman P.T. Barnum musical is going to outgross Optimus Prime, Mark Wahlberg, Michael Bay. I'm not really upset about that, but I think it says a lot about this movie and a lot about that movie.
Yeah, it sure does.
Position.
I sort of was like, yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. Sing your way to the top right there above the Transformers. The Post dropped a little bit. And it's interesting because the Oscars, they got a couple nominations.
The Post got a couple nominations, but not, the overwhelming flood that some people I thought had expected. It only dropped about 22%, past the domestic grosses of Munich and the BFG for Spielberg, even though, it got a picture. It got Meryl Streep a nomination, but it didn't have this kind of Spielberg, Tom Hanks, like this whole sweep that I think a lot of people might have expected, but it's still holding well. People are enjoying it. It's right now the top grossing Oscar nominee of the ones that kind of came out at the end of the year. Get Out and Dunkirk are above them, obviously, because they had huge success last winter and last summer, but The Post still holding well.
Yeah, well, Spielberg, Streep, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Top per screen. This is an interesting movie. This is a movie that had some controversy around it earlier this year.
A lot of controversy. Yeah. Padmavat took the per screen race just over $13,000. This is the largest debut for a Bollywood film in North America. Not an Indian film, not a film from India, but a Bollywood specifically. The biggest debut ever for that in North America. Yeah, this is a movie that has been the center of not just controversy, but intense controversy. Death threats, violent protests in India. It is an adaptation of an old epic poem about a Hindu princess and a Muslim sultan. And there were, I tried educating myself, and it kind of makes your head spin. There were some rumors that there were scenes involving the two of them that didn't turn out to be true, that sparked a lot of protests. There are people that just don't like the fact that it's an epic poem. It's historical, but there's some questions about how historical is it, but does it treat characters respectfully? And there's a lot of swirling rumor and controversy around this film. It was actually ordered to be shown. The Supreme Court in India looked at it and said it should be shown, but there were still places in northern India where it wasn't shown.
The director there were death threats against the director. There was death threats against the lead actress, Deepika, who was also in Triple X. The last Triple X movie, The Return of Xander Cage. If you did see that, you saw Deepika.
There you go.
But yeah, really, really certainly stirred up a lot of controversy. I'll say it's made me pretty curious to have a look.
Yeah, I mean, it's whether it was just it made a very fair amount of money overseas. Obviously, here the biggest Bollywood opening here. A lot of curiosity here about it. It opened in I think over about 400 screens, which is bigger than you see a lot of foreign films open. So this is a movie that has been the subject of intense scrutiny and curiosity. Opened to big numbers overseas and opened to the highest per screen average here in North America. So. There you go. It's one of those stories that is so big in other places here, and then it's a blip on our radar here as far as industry. But this is certainly in India a big story that is still continuing and has been for many months.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a look at the film. I will say it has piqued my interest, and it's too bad about the violence that's surrounding it. But the domestic charts. In our world,
here in the United States,
Insidious,
The Last Key remains the top grossing film of the year. But look what's number 2, Paddington, for about a week. It's going to get passed. But Paddington 2, now the second highest grossing film of the year. It passes The Commuter. It's done all right worldwide. Still just hasn't really found its niche here in the U.S. But, the holds haven't been bad. I think it dropped about 30%. So, it's doing okay. The best reviewed movie in the history of Rotten Tomatoes, Paddington.
And if you haven't seen it,
go see it. It's really
Paddington.
Good. It's really good.
It's very charming.
But this chart is going to change. So the 12 Strong and Den of Thieves, The Commuter, Black Panther's going to wipe all of these down a slot.
Yeah.
And then you have things like Padmavat, which we just talked about. And there's an animated film on there called JT. Can you throw it back up there because of it? Mary and the Witch's Flower, which is made about $1.8 million. Forever My Girl, which is a very small release. Proud Mary's dropping down the charts. So as we go wide, and next week, this week, we have Winchester, which is the only wide release. Helen Mirren playing. It's another kind of historical ghost movie. The week after that, there are 4 movies entering wide release, including the new Clint Eastwood film, including 50 Shades Freed.
Which we are going to go see and review.
Yes, we will. And then the week after that, Black Panther. So that chart is really going to start taking shape. And I'm also, if in case you're curious why I don't have the 2018 worldwide chart, because I think the first week that we did this, there's so many different kinds of information, and some people count Paddington 2 as a 2018 release, and some people count it as a 2017 release. Padmavat wasn't on a lot of the charts that I saw. I'm trying to figure out what the best source of information is right now to track a kind of a complete database of worldwide numbers. So I want to get that chart going, but it's so early in the year and it's so hard to kind of get the scattered data around that. I'm still building that 2018 worldwide chart, but I'm hoping to have it up soon. So if you want to check out those numbers, I want to get a good, nice, source, or at least a couple sources that I can pull from, because I like to showcase the movies like Wolf Warrior 2 and Padmavat and all these that are doing so well in other countries. I'd like to put them on the chart here so that we can get a nice, concise, beautiful global picture of what's happening at the box office.
We promised we were going to watch Wolf Warrior 2.
Yes, we did.
We sure did.
I did not keep that promise.
I haven't yet either, but perhaps this weekend I will.
Perhaps this weekend, but also perhaps this weekend I'll go see Helen Mirren in a haunted house.
I have mixed feelings about that trailer. I have really, really mixed feelings about that trailer because part of me, it's Helen Mirren.
Yeah.
And it's a haunted house, so I should love all of it. But there's a part of me that's like, why am I not hearing more about screenings for this movie, I wonder? Why is that? Nothing. I've heard nothing about a screening.
We'd like to review it. Maybe we'll review it, maybe we won't. It depends on if we can see it. Maybe we'll go see it on Thursday night and then review it on Friday.
Maybe it's a great, scary movie.
We'll see. I don't know. Anyway.
We will find out what 50 Shades, if it's free to unleash itself upon the box office next week.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. I'm just going to count down the days so I don't have to see that movie.
Till we're free of 50
Shades.
What if
it's great, though, Rob?
What if it's great?
What if they nail that landing?
I feel like they might.
Oh, I hope they do. Because I don't think I can take another one like the last two. We'll see.
It's going to suck.
I hope
we'll
not.
see you next week.
Thanks for watching.